Scheduled, and we are live once again.
Oh, one more time.
Happy Tuesday,
Still
folks.
above ground.
That's right. Well, knock on wood. So happy Tuesday, happy TeaFlix. Hope everybody is doing well and or getting better. We've had a couple of our regulars have some whoopsies this week, so sending you guys lots of love. And we've got the candles lit, and we're drinking to your health. Everybody.
And the further ruination of our own health.
And you know who you are, exactly. So today, thanks to John Bazzini, who has an incredible Beatles collection and a great blog and the Beatles bookstore run by our dear friend David Bedford, we're very excited to meet our guest. He's going to be beaming in live from Bournemouth, UK, which is one of my favorite coastal cities in the world, actually. Born in London, Jon Kremer relocated to Bournemouth as a teenager, coinciding with the dawn of the 1960s cultural explosion in British pop and rock music. He later established and ran Bus Stop Records. What a great name.
Isn't it just?
The original vintage vinyl store in Bournemouth, immersing deeply in the UK music scene from the late 60s onward. Kremer is famed for the incident known as the Men from Rickenbacker, which he will regale us with today. His first book, Bournemouth A Go-Go, the 60s memoir, focuses on rowdy music memory lanes from early 60s Bournemouth. It includes the backstage moments and captures the vibrant local music scene featuring future luminaries like Andy Summers of The Police, Robert Fripp, whom I know Elizabeth is a huge fan of, Greg Lake, Zoot Money, who used to come stay at our house, Tony Blackburn, the BBC radio DJ. An expanded and annotated update of his earlier memoir, the new book, revisits the original text with new footnotes, photos, and a fresh historical insight. And Kremer's connection to Al Stewart's eventual success, one of Kremer's best friends, with Year of the Cat, one of my favorite songs.
Oh, yeah.
A broader exploration of the key transitional events in pop rock history. While not exclusively Beatles focused, the book does examine pivotal moments of artistic influence and cultural change, with occasional references to Beatles context. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Buzz Bazzini for putting us together. Welcome Jon Kremer to his interview with Angie, now the oldest podcaster in the world, and me.
Thanks.
Welcome, Jon.
Hello, Jon.
Well, hello, and good morning, Los Angeles, I should think.
That's right. Good evening, England.
Also, I must say straight away what an absolute delightful pleasure it is to be sharing a screen with Angie and Ruth. And I think it can only go onwards and upwards from now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So set the scene for us. So, obviously your world revolves around Bournemouth, which why wouldn't it? It's fabulous. It's often been called the British Riviera, hasn't it? It's compared to the south of France. Set the scene for us. It's the early 1960s on the south coast of England. The big deal in town was the Gaumont or the Gaumont. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Theater. Yes. Paint a picture for our viewers and listeners, because this will be a podcast also, of a typical summer's holiday week in Bournemouth at the time. And then we'll get into your incredible happenstance stories and why the Beatles were there.
Well, if we mean at the time, the pivotal year of 1963, because there's the simple thing in pop music, certainly, but in pop culture generally, and if it's UK-centric, which is before and after the first week of October 1962, because on the 5th of October, an extraordinary cosmic thing happens. A Liverpool combo that means nothing to anyone outside of the denizens of Liverpool and Hamburg have their first record released, obviously, on EMI's Parlophone. Right. But on the very same day, the first James Bond film premieres in London's Odeon, Leicester Square. The very first opportunity for Sean Connery to say, "My name is Bond, James Bond." And it's on the same day Love Me Do is issued. So to my mind, this has always been when the 1960s start, not at midnight 1959, but on that day in 62. Prior to that, we have a vibrant British music scene, which is very still American dependent. Cliff Richard and the Shadows.
Sure.
Okay, Shadows fantastic. Cliff doing his best to be a lightweight version of an American singer. Right. And then there are, I don't know, hits from Tamla Motown, though it's not a label as yet. But there's nothing really exciting happening because rock and roll, with the demise of Alan Freed in the late 1950s, all its heroes have gone. little Richard is not sure if he's got a spiritual outpouring and wants to be doing it. Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis in various ways are disgraced. Elvis Presley's been in the army, out the army.
Yeah.
He's no longer a singer wanting to take you on a walk down to Lonely Street and Heartbreaker's Hell. He's now a Rock-a-Hula Baby singer, and it's not the same thing. So no one's expecting the sort of stop clock of pop culture to ever change. In England, you will see young males dressed with, I don't know, a Bobby Darin haircut and two-piece mohair suit and suede shoes, and there'll be females dressed in bouffant dresses, a little bit like Mrs. Bobby Darin, Sandra Dee, and then suddenly it all changes. It changes with that day in October. But it's a few weeks when you get into the beginning of 1963, which for an American audience, we know it all starts in February 64 in the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right.
Yeah.
In England, it really starts with Please Please Me. And with Please Please Me, it very quickly escalates to something that's not just in pop music pages, something's on the front page of newspapers, because something's happening, and it continues with From Me to You, and then with She Loves You, and by then Beatlemania is in full flow. And whatever Bournemouth was like the rest of England before that changed. And by the time Brian Epstein decides to put the Beatles into Bournemouth for 6 consecutive nights.
Right, that was a question.
Yeah.
So that
Amazing thing. It's a very different Bournemouth to how I could have described it before.
Yeah.
Sorry, a long-winded answer.
well, that's all right.
No. I was just wondering, I was wondering what year
It was
the Beatles
63.
actually said. 63.
Yeah.
And a whole week in Bournemouth. Why did that happen? Do you know?
Well, okay, they'd reached a stage where the touring had already meant they'd gone from being third on the bill to closing the show to people queuing overnight for tickets, and this starts to make the front pages.
I see.
Time of From Me to You, it's apparent something's different. This is bigger than Cliff and the Shads. This is something else. No one, of course, could ever guess where it was going to go to. Which is basically now they're sailing on into the history books. After half a century, we know that we can talk in terms of Mozart-like centuries.
Yes.
This is just something else. But then, for England, it's taking place in stages. A lot of Beatle history books or pop culture books will cite a time later in the year when they appear on the Royal Variety Show and Stop the Traffic in London, and John Lennon's famous remark about shake your jewellery. It all takes off from there, but it didn't happen overnight. It's been escalating all through 1963. So by August, Brian Epstein had this option. He could book them anywhere and it would sell out completely. And so back in the days of package tours still, which meant they would play 2 shows a night. They'd probably perform for about 22 minutes, head the thing, be a break. And of course, this meant the promoter, and that promoter very often might be someone like Don Arden, who I know Ruth has an association with in his later Jetler years.
Yes.
But he would then, of course, be able to double his take. And of course, Arthur Howes and other promoters, Roy Tempest, whatever.
Roy Tempest, I haven't heard that name in years.
Yeah, probably the best thing. But we, so there were two shows tonight. This will become relevant to the story that we get to eventually. So Brian Epstein has booked them in. I think it was partly because Brian, like Ruth, liked Bournemouth. He used to, in the 50s, come to Bournemouth on holidays with his parents. And it was just, I think it was down to him more than anything. So they're booked into what I would pronounce as the Gaumont Theatre. Okay. It's in the centre of Bournemouth in a road called Westover Road. 2 doors away from it, and geographically this has some relevance soon, was a 4-star hotel called the Palace Court.
Oh, yes.
A fronted hotel, very nice hotel. So the Beatles were staying there for almost a week, 6 days.
And I'm guessing Queenie Epstein and the clan were also staying there on Brian's holidays. So
they did turn up at various points, and so did Cynthia. A little sidebars to this. Mark Lewison, who I'm sure your Beatle enthusiast audience would know, is the great researcher and historian on the Beatles. George Martin once said, Mark knows more about all of this than any of us. And I think that's enough said.
Yes.
He once, we've been having like email exchanges for almost 20 years now, he and I, and he once said to me that, all right, John Lennon was wont in later years to refer to the Beatles' touring days as being like Fellini's Satyricon. This meant that there were a lot of girls around. But Mark said that week in Bournemouth was a very quiet week for John, because most of the week Cynthia was there as well. And Brian was there, and also, and in passing, I think Ringo had recently just bought a new car, Ford Zodiac, and he'd driven himself down there that day.
Really?
So it's all these little associations with it. Anyway, I tell you what, it makes much more sense if I don't keep talking.
It's our friend Erin Badgley is looking forward to reading your book. Yes, it's we bought it online. They both are fabulous reads, because again, it's like we were saying earlier, John. It's the nuggets and the uncovered history, isn't it, that people want to hear. So do you? I'm sure you do recall the first time you heard "She Loves You" live before it was released. What was the reaction like in the room or the theatre? Could you even hear the Beatles playing?
Two excellent questions. People often will say, particularly people who actually weren't there, that because of the screaming you couldn't hear them. Well, I can't speak for every venue, but I can speak for the venue, the Gaumont, on the very first show, on the very first night. I went there with a good friend of mine, and we'll come to that later, who that is, or was, still is. We go to this show. We were involved with the local beat group scene. I tried to play guitar very badly and very quickly gave it up, because I'd become friends the previous autumn with this guy who was just leaving school. I'd just left school. We'd kind of bonded immediately on our interest in music, guitars, records, girls. And then, because of hearing how he could play even then, I very quickly packed it in. It wouldn't be too long until later in '63, I'd be at gigs and listening to people like Andy Summers, who was with Suit Money's band then, or Robert Fripp, who had his own group called League of Gentlemen, and was known as Bob Fripp then. And I thought, that's ridiculous. To even become halfway any good, it would mean an awful lot of practicing. And I'd never picked a guitar up with that idea in mind. I'd picked it up with the idea in mind that one, like every teenage male who was interested in guitars in England then, you wanted to be Hank Marvin. So I'd like to play a few Shadows tunes very badly. I never any good, but I thought this is a good way, how can I put it, of attracting girls.
Well, we used to call them chick magnets.
This was good, but if you're no good at it, and it's a lot of hard work, you've got to practice, and you don't really want to be a musician, I found there are other easier ways to do this. So
I had a friend in school in Wirral who didn't play guitar, didn't own a guitar, but bought a guitar case and stuffed it full of like socks and things, and used to get on and off the Mersey ferry in the bus with it, and girls would follow him because they thought he was a guitar player.
This is really all you need. All you need is love plus that. I think we digressed a bit here. With seeing the show, She Loves You was the penultimate number. They did 8 songs. There was a lot of screaming.
8 songs?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How much was a ticket for 8 songs?
Well, very good question. I can't remember for sure. Probably something like about 6 shillings, about 13 UP, about a third of a pound.
Oh my God.
About a sixth of a dollar. I don't know what.
Wow.
Not a lot of money. Let's put it that way. But the trick was getting the tickets.
Yeah.
So we got 2 tickets. We could have taken a couple of girls, but the idea was, 1, tricky to get the tickets, and 2, there are going to be plenty of girls there. It's a Beatles thing. Yeah. Yes, they were screaming, but yes, when John was doing his little humorous riffs and Paul was doing his introductions and things, yes, you could hear them very clearly. well, clearly enough. We were sitting about 50 feet away from the Paul and George thing. Now, anyone who knows any of this knows the look and the lineup was simple. Paul and George were on one mic,
Yeah.
and balancing them with his stance and his Anello and David Cuban Hill Beatle boots firmly planted, and the Pierre Cardin jackets was on the other side of the stage. I suppose from a stage point of view, you call it stage left. But anyway, we're watching this. We already knew this is something else. They're already fantastic. They closed with Twist and Shout. When they did She Loves You, not heard before, it was released on the 5 days later, on the Friday of that week. So Mark and I used to have quite a little back and forth about, was this ever the first live performance? They did do a TV thing a few days earlier. They performed it on somewhere in maybe the north of England, not a national TV thing, I think. There's a small chance whether or not they'd done it the night before in Torquay, but you can never find a set list for it. And if Mark couldn't, no one could. So we've always gone with the idea it's the first time and the first show, and it's fantastic. She Loves You, to me, it is still the greatest all-time pure pop record. Yeah. We're not talking rock and roll, we're not talking heavy rock, we're talking pure pop. And
well, also from a lyrical standpoint, it was the everyman song. It's what made country music and Garth Brooks, great. Is that they are talking in the first person about the third person, but the third person, the audience can identify. She loves you. It's not she loves me. It's it's that everyman touch
that is a very, very good point. They'd expanded from me to you, please, please me. I think that's a very good literary point. Yeah, they expanded it perfectly. The song is fantastic, exciting, and this actually plays into why, as soon after this finishes, I had this weird moment.
Well, that's what Angie wants to.
Yeah, I wanted to know. Please tell us about the infamous Men from Rickenbacker story.
I can't wait.
Okay, well, we have to say two things. This still exists, and because of the fantastic development over half a century of the Beatles, in which the story gets bigger and bigger, it's transgenerational. There are people, very young people, who are very interested and are, as Ruth, I think, said earlier, people want to know more and more small things. And because that reason, the story that would have been a personal little anecdote has continued. And eventually it was retold in newspapers and magazines, then eventually on radio, even on TV, principally because the person with me, and now it's a moment to mention, my friend, who we'd become friends as just exiting school days the year before, happened to be called Alistair Stewart. He very quickly changed this to Al Stewart, and is principally known for a few platinum hits in the late 70s. Obviously, Year of the Cat, Time Passages, and On the Border, which were all top 10 American hits.
One of my favorite artists.
But Al's somebody, if anyone's seen him live, he likes to chat, and he does a lot of very good chat in between songs. Well, over time, he started to talk about the time he met, John Lennon, and how his friend Johnny, that's me, come up with this ridiculous idea as a 16-year-old. He can't believe how it happened. Al's 18 months older than me. He was only 17, but still couldn't believe how any of this happened. But it did, and he tells his story. So it's developed a kind of thing of its own, partly because it's the Beatles, but slightly because the person with me turned out to have a career and was a very chatty on-stage person. To the degree, in the early 2000s, a box set of all the Beatles CDs was put out, and in mono and stereo, and it was another one of these spikes in the Beatles story where suddenly the Times of London, which for anyone in America probably still means something, yes, a major newspaper, ran a week of stories on the Beatles, and one day it was on people who'd met them back in the Beatlemania days.
Ah, interesting.
So they printed one of the versions of the Men from Rickenbacker story. Now, anybody who would like to read it, how can one say, with a bit more veracity, might like to read my book. I'll hold it up at this point.
Yes.
That's a copy of it. Yes, it's available on Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk, or as people like to say, anywhere you'd like to buy a book.
Absolutely. And it's
On
a
the publisher, New Haven's website, the great music publisher, with a wonderful CEO called Teddy Darlan, which is a wonderful name, I think. Anyway, that's the book, and this will tell you the real story. But Al's version of it has mutated over time. It's for stage entertainment. And he'll say things like, Neil Aspinall, whose name I hope means a lot to people, he was trying to get us thrown out. But John Lennon was saying, no, let them stay. Al will forgive me for saying, because he knows what I'm saying is true, that's all not what happens. But Al tells the story, the Times print his stage version of it, which is half accurate and half not so.
Okay, so we want it straight from the horse's mouth.
Okay.
What happened on that?
If you have Beatlemania is already in place. Outside the theatre are hundreds, possibly 600-700, maybe 1,000 people, young people, male, female. There's a photo in the book which will show what it looks like looking out from the Gaumont Theatre to another theatre called the Pavilion, which is across the road. Has a car park in front of it. There's the road. The road and the car park are full of people. You can only just see people. They're waiting in case they see the Beatles. They're waiting to go into the second house. There are 2 or 3 British bobbies, that's uniformed policemen, who are holding back the crowd because to the side of the Gaumont Theatre is a narrow alleyway that leads to the stage door. And again, that's something I knew quite recently, that Ruth is familiar with the venue, backstage and all of it. But it's intrinsic to this story to know that. It's jam-packed. We've watched them. They've sung She Loves You. We've knocked out. We know we've seen something different to everything before. We've watched them do Twist and Shout. They've finished. They've done their Epstein bow. They've left. The hubble bubble of young teenage people, mainly teenagers, beginning to quieten and empty the auditorium. I knew a lot about guitars, I thought. I knew about Fenders and Gretschers and Gibsons and Guilds. People need to know that Rickenbacker guitars, equally famous now, were not in 1963. Sure. It's for a year or so after that, because of John Lennon playing one and later George, that they become equally famous. They're not that known. I couldn't recognize the guitar that John was playing. I mean, I later know it's I think a Capri 353 or something. He bought it, well, when we talk with him, we know he bought it in Hamburg and all sorts of things. But I turned to Al, as the crowd's going, I said to him, what's that guitar John Lennon's playing? Any idea? He's probably the only person in Bournemouth who'd have told me. And he said, yeah, I think it's a Rickenbacker. And I have no idea why. I said, wouldn't it be great if we could talk to him about it? We're just on this buzz of not wanting to let the moment go by. It's absurd. You know, we might be used to getting backstage to various things, but this isn't a get backstage. You've got to get through this crowd. It's not going to happen. I said, wouldn't it be great? And Al looks at me in a kind of slightly quizzical way saying, yeah, well, how exactly are we going to do that?
No kidding.
Actually, I had no idea. It would be nice to be able to say now, I had a cunning plan, which might mean something to people who watched a TV show called Blackadder. But, but I did not have a cunning plan. And I just said, okay, why don't we go to the manager of the theatre's office, say, not we've seen the show, we've just arrived from London, come down from London, we've got an appointment with the Beatles management to do with Rickenbacker guitars, and which we represent, and we can't get backstage because of this screaming crowd of teenagers. Now, I know we're the same age. Little thing, back in those days, not only the performers, but people behind the scenes were very young quite often, not all of them. I looked probably a couple of years older. I probably looked 18, maybe 19, but I was 16. Al 17, again, looking at least a year or so older. If one thinks at the time the Rolling Stones really have just started. They've just had Come On released 3 weeks before.
Right.
They are discovered, managed and produced by Andrew Lou Golden, who at the time is 19.
Oh my Lord.
19 years old.
Wow.
Andrew and I occasionally have an email correspondence now, and he's still amazing. But he's 19. So if this sounds to people just that ridiculous, it's slightly less if you take account of that. Al looks at me and says, something to the effect of, okay, looking a bit doubtful. Okay, we could try and do that. So I said, let's do it. So we leave the auditorium, we go into the foyer, find out where the manager's office is, go, knock on the door. I have to remember, this is half time in that first evening. He's got them there for 6 days. He'd never signed up for this. He's a middle-aged guy.
Chaos.
No one's experienced Beatlemania. It might play into what he did next, maybe For a Quiet Life. Door opens, we go in. There's a couple of desks there. It's only him there. There's no one else. He's got on his table an almost full pint of beer. Now, I mention this because he might have decided, let's get rid of both of these quickly and go back to my pint of beer. Pure speculation. Who couldn't possibly know? Okay. He says, yes, can I help you? And at this point, Al's standing behind me near the door. He will admit this, ready for a very quick, very embarrassed exit. Which is logical. I said, hello, my name's Kremer. This is my associate Stewart. I said, we've come down from London. We have Beatles-related music, Rickenbacker related music with the Beatles and their management. We can't get backstage. You can understand why. Can you help us? And he looked at me and he said, okay, and picked up a phone or an intercom to the stage door. And then he paused and he said, what's your name again? I said, my name's Kremer. This is Mr. Stewart. He said, Mr. Kremer and Mr. Stewart are going to come round. He said, let them in. Oh, fine, thank you. So we say thanks, and we have a little chat about this amazing crowd, and how, it is. And then we leave. And then, of course, anyone paying attention to this, the first problem looms large, which is we've got to get through this crowd to the stage door. We get one or two of these bobbies. We say what it is and what we're doing. Right. In this effect, they help push back this crowd to let us get to the stage door entrance. We see one or two people, actually girls, who recognise us from the local scene and wondering what on earth is happening. When we get near the stage door, it's surrounded by girls who've got autograph books in their hands. I only mention this because when they realised we're actually going in, they tried to start forcing these autograph books on us. Oh no! Frankly, I could have done without at that moment. But we managed. The young guy opens the door. It's like a youngish stage door man or assistant. He says, "Yes, you can come in." He said, "But as soon as I open this door, they're all going to rush in." So we managed to find a way in which he opens the door, we go in, he slams the door behind us. Problem 2 comes up. We're backstage, a lot of hubble bubble, people moving around, people on the bill, show groups, stage hands. No one takes any notice because they think, well, if you're there, you've got a reason to be there. At this point, problem number 2, we are not from Rickenbacker Guitars and we don't have an appointment. And I then noticed, second on the bill was Billy J. Kremer. And yes, I know his name sounds a bit like mine, but my real name isn't William Ashton. So Billy J. And his backing group, the Dakotas. And we happened to spot a guy called Ray Jones who played bass with them. Really nice guy. I knock on the door. It opens, slightly mesmerised by seeing in the background a Ringo Starr and a Paul McCartney, but it's Neil Aspinall, who is their road manager then, close friend, who remains there all his life, eventually is the CEO of Apple Corps, of their company, and of course, well known to Ruth and to Angie, I'm absolutely sure. So Neil opens the door and he's straight to the point, yes, what do you want? And I said, well, actually, we've just seen the show. We'd like to talk with John about his Rickenbacker guitar. That's all. He looks at it, he probably thinks, oh, how are they here? We're here for a week. Maybe they're related to the mayor of Bournemouth, I don't know. He says, wait here, closes the door. Door opens, it's John Lennon. Well, 10 minutes earlier, I'd just seen him singing Twist and Shout. And he comes out into the hall and says, I can't ask you in. He says, it's very busy in there. I later found out it was Billy J's 20th birthday they were celebrating.
Yeah.
And we finished celebrating in the Palace Court Hotel. So, fine. He's changed out of his stage uniform. He's in a denim shirt and, jeans. And he's got horn-rimmed glasses on. Very similar to Angie's. But in those days, to put it in context for people, John was never seen wearing glasses.
No, of course not.
He wasn't seen wearing glasses probably for several years since he started to wear the little wire rim ones that became so famous. And they were called Lennon glasses. But he only put them on around 66 when he was filming How I Won the War for Dick Lester. So this was and I always thought, this was rather nice that he didn't mind being seen, if you like, by us in this one. So I just said, well, we're in local beat groups, which is a bit of exaggeration. Al definitely was. I was hopeless. And
so were you still spinning the We're from Rickenbacker story at this point to John?
No. Oh, gosh, no. We stopped that as soon as we saw Neil Aspinall and just said, we're in local beat groups. We'd like to talk to him about his guitar. That's the story disappeared like mist on a summer's day then. It had done its job. People had fallen for it. It meant we were backstage talking to John Lennon. But what?
Froze again. At least we got to that point.
Yep.
We got that far.
Many days in the next week.
Oh dear. I think we're having more Bournemouth tech problems on our end. John keeps freezing. What a shame. This is so frustrating. But, gotta love technology when it works.
And it does work. I've no idea why this is happening. So anyway, we talked to him about all sorts of things. He said, what did you think of it? Which is ludicrous. So we're telling a Beatle thing. We said, well, it's fantastic, stunning. But we said we couldn't hear your guitar that loudly. We could hear George much more loudly. And he said, yeah, it's something like Bloody George. He said, I'll sort that out in the second half. I'll jump ahead a little bit. The next day, the Bournemouth Echo, the newspaper, daily paper, reviewed the show. They said Beatles were stunning. But they say, in the second house, they said John Lennon's guitar was just much too loud. It just distorted everything. So inadvertently, we'd almost ruined a Beatles gig, but that was by the by. We worked out afterwards, Alan, that we were actually sitting basically in front of George Harrison's amplifier. And in those days, there weren't mixing desks. There wasn't anything balancing it. Wow. Yeah, I'll go and get the aluminium foil. It's on the way.
Exactly.
But when it came down to it,
what a moment in your life, and something.
We spoke. I thought, I'll show how hip and cool we are. I said, you're fantastic, but we also think the Rolling Stones are great. Now, bearing in mind, they were hardly known outside London. Come On had just been released and wasn't a hit yet 3 weeks earlier. It was only ever a small hit. But I knew that, I didn't know they'd all seen them yet, but I knew George Harrison had gone down to Richmond and seen them a few months earlier. So I thought this would be okay. And yeah, he was very laconic, very laid back. He said, yeah, and he says, we like the Stones, etc. And we talked about this. And I'll talk with him about why they use Vox amplifiers, because you could get Fender amps that were better than used in the studio. And he said, oh, well, Brian's done a deal with Vox, which you could see Vox ads for them and the Beatles standing in front of them. And he said, oh, I think they're rubbish. Said, I'd like to throw it off the pier. Probably think of this location. So we had a really, really nice chat. Then he said this fantastic thing. He said, would you like to see the Rickenbacker? I said, yeah. So I said, okay, wait here. Goes back in the dressing room, comes out again, and hands me his guitar. Now, anyone paying attention knows I'm not very good. Now, Al will always tell this story, partly because it sounds better, but partly because he probably believes this over time, that John Lennon hands the guitar to him. Al does play the guitar and plays it very much better than me. And I very quickly hand it to him, but it's actually me that hands him the guitar.
Wow.
So he's handing me this guitar. And most people who play guitar would know you're either going to have a strap around it and you're standing up, or you're sitting down. I'm suddenly standing there with no strap, no seat. And I'm standing on one leg, a bit like a flamingo, balancing this thing. And I quickly played a few chords and a little sub Dwayne Eddy riff just to show I could play something. And I'd made comments guitarists would all understand about the low action and the short scale guitar. And said, great. I must say at this point, John Lennon didn't seem that interested in guitars. He said, oh, he'd got it in Hamburg and this, that, and the other. He liked it a lot. Great rhythm guitar, all these sort of things. And then I quickly hand it to Al, who plays it a lot longer and a lot better. And John was looking at this, and to be frank, he's completely indifferent to it, but very nice. And then eventually sort of says, well, I better take this back now, taking from Al. And he says, I've got to go. We've got to do another show in, I don't know, 20 minutes or whatever. That is probably a lot longer, but the show will be starting then. So we say, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. What else can we say? We make our way out of the theatre, and then we're in this huge crowd. And we think, well, what happened here? Cut a long story short, and it's much more about it in the book, my memoir. We decide, hang on, they're staying at the Palace Court Hotel. We found this out from Ray Jones and the Dakotas. They're all staying there. So if I can talk our way into the backstage like this, we'll try and talk our way into the hotel tomorrow and meet all of them. Yeah. Well, in case we get cut off here, the next day is the Tuesday. I do manage to talk our way in by pretending to be reporters from the Bournemouth Echo. We have this great moment when actually the door of the Gaumont has not the Gaumont, the hotel has a commissioned person outside in a uniform, of course, sitting at the door. In fact, the theatre did as well in those days. And I rehearse in my mind, we're from the Echo, we've got an appointment with the Beatles management, blah, blah, blah. And then I find myself actually saying this out loud to this guy, who then says, oh, yes, okay, sir, opens the door, fantastic, and then says this rather disturbing thing. He says, your colleague is already there with them. Oh, thanks very much. Walk in. So immediately we're now we're no longer from Rickenbacker Guitars. We're also no longer from the Echo. I had a thought. Go up to the reception desk. Young woman there is dealing with a couple of people, middle-aged people, comes to us, and I say, can you put us through to Ray Jones? I don't know his room number. We're here to see him. Because Ray had said, see you around sometime. So I thought, well, okay, here we are. We're around. Put him on the phone. He says, the room number, come on up. So we go bounding up 3 flights of stairs or whatever. And Ray Jones was, I think, an ex-bank clerk. The Dakotas were from Manchester, and Brian Epstein put them together. And Ruth and Angie, because I know you know all this stuff backwards and inside out. But for anyone who doesn't. And we're chatting with him. And his hotel room, this is earlier than the days of trashed hotel rooms. And he's very, he's just marveling at, he and the group he's in have got a #1 hit records with Do You Want to Know Secret and Bad to Me. But to him, he realized it's nothing compared to what's happening with the Beatles. And he said they're downstairs in the lounge, he said, with the other Dakotas, he said, let's go and join them. Well, one end of if you look at the Palace Court lounge, it's on the first floor, there's a balcony, Art Deco balcony, and the hotel had taken one end of it and roped it off from the other hotel guests just for the Beatles and the show. So we go down there. It's all defended from people who are very well mannered. It's a 4-star hotel by a sort of red rope on a couple of stands and little gold ends to it. Move the rope aside, walk in. We sit down by a table next to Tony Mansfield, the drummer, and Mike Maxfield, and we start chatting. And I'm chatting with Tony Mansfield because I knew of his sister who was just about to sign a recording deal because they're from Manchester. His name was Elkie Brooks. Now, you know, it took Elkie Brooks a long while to be an overnight success, just like
Girls, a singer.
Stewart. It took a long time for you, the Captain.
Right.
He'd had 5 or 6 albums out by then. Anyway, so we're having a nice chat. At the next table near the window are John Lennon, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and 2 guys who are interviewing them. I later find out they're from Beatle Monthly. The first issue had come out in August. They were interviewing for issue number 2. And I later found out lots about them from Mark Lewison, who told me exactly who they were.
Wow.
Which is an interesting digression. But time is fuging, is fleeting. I'm sure you want to wrap this up soon if technology doesn't scupper us again. So we wind up half listening to a conversation we're having with the Dakotas, half listening to this interview. And at one point, I think, I'm not someone who would go around getting autographs because this sounds terrible, but I just wanted to be more cool than that. So I didn't. I've got to do this. It's insane. So I wandered over to them, interrupt this. And I didn't have much with me, like a scrap of card and a pencil or something stupid. And they stopped the interview, and George just immediately takes it and starts writing his signature, and he breaks the pencil off. And he turns around and he says to John, it doesn't actually ask him, he just says, John, give me your pen. So Lennon passes him over a pen. He finishes his signature in ink. Actually, if you give me a second, I might even be able to actually show it to you, because it's actually, I don't know if you can see it. I will try and hold it up.
Yeah, hold it to your left.
To
your left.
Counterintuitive.
There you go.
And it starts in pencil, it ends in ink, then John adds his and Ringo adds his. And I had this ludicrous set of autographs.
That's great.
Probably the slowest ones ever done in the world, the time it took them to do it. With start in pencil and finish in ink.
That's wild.
Now, Paul wasn't around at that moment.
Okay.
He disappeared. I'm not sure. His father was there as well. He'd watch it. Okay, Jim was there.
Okay.
I didn't meet him, but he was there, and he'd gone off to do various things various times. I think he might even have got as far as the New Forest one day, Paul, to go horse riding or something. Sure.
Back in those days, we didn't have Apple tags on people. We weren't tracking people. People didn't keep diaries. We didn't have all of this.
Exactly. I later do meet Paul, but it's a long time later, and that's a whole other story, and that's in as well. But so we having this nice chat, and then leading to it, we came up with this great idea. We thought, why don't we organise a party? We connected with a club called the Disco Go-Go, which is where people like Zoot Money and Andy Summers, Bob Fripp would play, and my friend Al, his group would play there. And we thought, why don't we do this? There wasn't the party, but we thought, how hard would that be to organise? So I went over to Ringo, who was wandering around by then, said, he was chatting with a guy called Tommy Quickly, who was on the bill. Tommy never made it. He had a hit single that Lennon and McCartney were giving away songs left, right, and centre, and ones they didn't want. It's called Tip of My Tongue. It didn't make it. But I'm talking to both of them and said, would you like to come to a party? Which didn't exist. And Ringo is very, Tommy Quickly is very, yeah, great, when? And Ringo's very, I don't think we're leaving the hotel unless we need to. No. Really don't want to. I later heard a story about Ringo, and not one, but two, but three of the chambermaids, which probably tell you why they didn't actually have a need to be leaving the theatre.
No.
That's really our audience. But but I suddenly thought, okay, that's it. And then it basically came time for our stop, and I stopped pushing our luck, and we left.
That's great. What an insider story. It's just, it's somebody commented before, right place, right time. Eventually you opened Bus Stop Records. You must have sold a lot of Beatles vinyl. What were the most in-demand records, and did any of your did one single customer interaction stand out?
Okay, well, some of them did in passing, because over many years, some of them started by being interested via me and talking in Bus Stop Records, and went on. There's a guy, Mark Patress, who's written many books, including on the Beatles. There are people who went off and started various careers purely because of their excitement about records. And in Bus Stop, it very much became a vintage vinyl collector shop. And with the Beatles, there was always this thing of people thought they had rare records.
Yeah.
They sold a lot of records. They usually weren't rare. You had to have maybe a first pressing and sometimes even a first edition of a first pressing. You'd have to know how to read the run out groove on it. The next thing was they had to be immaculate.
Yeah.
The only collectors, if the record starts having a few marks on it, it's not, it drops 10% in value, it drops 70% in value. So there used to be lots of conversations, how one could put it, trying to educate people to this fact of life. Yeah, in those sort of shops, anybody who's familiar with an author, Nick Hornby, or a John Cusack film that's made of his book High Fidelity.
Yes.
These shops are like little
museums.
You know, people go to them and they become more than just shops. It's not like now where you're going to, why don't people go to shops? When they went to a Tower Records or a Virgin Megastore, I mean, now people just stream things, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I got a call from a lovely friend of mine today, Bill Lynch. He owns a gig in North Hollywood here called the Write-Off Room. It's the oldest continuous live club in America, in Los Angeles County, and it opened as it was Oil Can Harry's, then it was something else, and it was something else, and it's been going since 1918, and it was only closed during, I think, like 3 weeks during World War II. And then during COVID. But Bill Lynch owns the Write-Off Room, and he was telling me a horror story which will break your heart today. A friend of his was a senior vice president of A&R for Warner Brothers Records for 27 years.
Yeah.
He had 40,000, amongst them first pressings, vinyl LPs, 22,000 45s, singles, a signed poster by Jimi Hendrix, and a framed letter personally to him from George Harrison. And he lost them all in the Palisades fire on January 6th this year.
No.
Could you imagine all that music, all those first pressings lost? Yeah. The guy is apparently still inconsolable. I can't even imagine. I mean,
exactly. No, financially it means nothing because you can't insure something like this. It's you can't get that experience back of sitting down and putting on that vinyl that maybe has only been played 10 times to close friends, right? Yeah. It's clean and it's crisp and it's through nice big real speakers and it's not this MP3 crap they try and sell us in these headphones nowadays. It is the most weird thing that ever since the days of, I don't know, cylinders, and then shellac records, 78s, and then polyvinyl chlorate and 45s and 33 RPMs, and then eventually cassette tape, not too good, need Dolby, and it's still rubbish. And the unfortunate 8 tracks, the stereo 8 tracks, come and go, and all this stuff, no good. But basically things got better and better and better. And then suddenly the technology takes over and people get this wonderful thing, 5,000 tunes in their hand, a million now, whatever, streamed. But the quality goes down to an MP3 level. I know. And there's no way of fixing it. And people seem to accept it, you know.
But thank God vinyl's making a comeback. My record, when I was signed as an artist to BMG through Jupiter Records in Germany, mine was the last vinyl that came off the pressing plant in Gütersloh in Germany. And I drove up there. I was living in Munich. Just met Martin. I drove up to Gütersloh to the pressing plant, BMG, to see my record coming off. And then they shut it down. We had a big champagne and pretzel party. But it was sort of the end of an era. And Melodia Records in Moscow were the first ones to come back with this new vinyl revolution, because they had never stopped making vinyl in Russia. And they were the records were round, but the vinyl was cut to a square so that the corners used to stick off the edge of the turntable.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you remember that?
Well, I do. I also remember in another sense, as far into the mid-60s, you could buy 78s of the Beatles that they were pressing in India. And, if you wanted She Loves You on a 78, they're very collectible and they do exist. Funnily enough, the value isn't quite as high as you might imagine, because sending things through the post, which for a collector you need probably to find and do, they're so breakable. You could look at a shellac 78 and it would just break in front of you.
Well, here's an interesting thing as an artist. There is still in today's, even though we're transmitting music files and intellectual property via electronic means, they're delivered through Spotify or MP3 or whatever. There is still in every artist contract with a major label, because of the old Bakelite days, there is still a 5% withholding to the record label for breakage. How do you break an MP3? Just pay the artist.
This is brilliant. Well, the first pop record, I think, is looked upon as Alexander's Ragtime Band. We're going back to 1918 here. There's an awful lot, particularly to do with song publishing, which, if anyone's interested, has been and always will be the major way of making money in the music business.
Right. And t-shirts, publishing and merchandise. The rest of it is a lost leader.
Yeah. It's very funny how the industry changed, because it was a golden era of making money from records, long gone. It now all goes into bank accounts somewhere in Silicon Valley. But and there used to be this era of, you'd make an LP, it wasn't, money from that. You probably had a big advance, you had to pay studio costs. There was money from that, huge sums, but you would tour and lose money, but you had to tour to sell the LP. Now, for many years, the album actually exists to promote the touring.
That's right.
The 360-degree thing, you've got merchandising, possibly if you're Taylor Swift, you've got the sponsorship, you've got all of that. And that's where the money is, and the publishing.
I mean, most people don't know that when you subscribe to Apple Music, or Apple Music isn't so bad, but Spotify, they pay every time you stream a song, they pay the artist 0.0003 cents per stream. A single used to be £1, and the record label would probably get 85%, but there'd be 15 pence split between the artist and the manager. Now it's 0.0003 cents.
Which is why the story, possibly apocryphal, of a few years back, Elton John showing someone, a friend or something, a check for something like $3,600. Yeah. And someone is saying, what's that from? And he would say Spotify or something. And they say, what, for today or whatever. He said, no, that's the last quarter. Yeah. In other words, nothing.
No, but it's the only option that we consumers are given, because they're going to shut down the iTunes store. I still buy all my singles 99 cents at a time, because I know the artists make 59 or 65 cents. But I know they're going to shut off all of that, deliver you the track and the licensing and stuff. It's such a shame. But what a great life and time we three and our wonderful audience have all lived through. Where music was great. When you look at the length of the universe, the billions of years the universe has been here, and we were lucky enough to be alive with James Bond, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Salvador Dali, Twiggy, and all the rest of it. I mean, that's just a blip on the radar.
Well, actually, can I plug another book of mine while we're at it?
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold this one up. This one came out about 15 months ago. This is not autobiographical, so anyone who would like to have a slightly different view on things than just me talking on about things I've experienced. This takes a look at things to do with the chapters on the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Simon & Garfunkel, Roxy Music, and it's all to do with inflection points, things that might have happened or might not have happened. And it's quite, to me, interesting about, I don't know, if you look at things like chaos theory, the book is sprinkled with sort of layman's sort of science references, but it does, I think, give people sometimes pause for thought to think all the stuff that Ruth just mentioned, this may or may not have happened. The biggest one of all is a well-known story. It's not covered in the book. It's just so obvious. Maybe mentioned in the intro. It's when John and Paul meet that day in June 1957. Everyone knows the story, but
Walton Village.
Hello, goodbye. Except Paul picks up a guitar and plays Eddie Cochran's 20 Flight Rock. And John Lennon is very impressed by this. And it's not hello, goodbye. He's only just turned 15. It's a big difference then for, John Lennon's age. Could have been nothing. Right. None of this might happen. The idea is the things I write about in Chain Reaction is that, well, for that to happen, other things had to happen before. Eddie Cochran had to write and record 20 Flight Rock.
Yep.
The movie, The Girl Can't Help It, had to open. And 3 or 4 months before they meet, John Lennon and Paul McCartney separately have been there, seen that. They're knocked out by a lot of things, including Eddie Cochran's 20 Flight Rock. So Paul might have picked up the guitar. He did play other things that day to him, I believe. That this is a key thing. So my whole idea in the book is, with other artists and totally different things, there's certain little things that if they didn't happen, none of this happens. It becomes like that movie Yesterday that came out a few years ago.
Yes.
If anyone's not familiar with, it's a very nice film, not to be taken seriously, in which it's an imagined conceit that something happens in the world and the Beatles don't exist. But there's one person who's still around who knows they did. And the whole film is about him and his story. And it's very, 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 very enjoyable. One thing I agree with in the film, which is they say the Rolling Stones still existed. Well, I do cover at the end of Chain Reaction a point that is, I know it's all make-believe, it doesn't matter. But if you pull on any of history's threads, it falls apart. Here's a big one. The Rolling Stones have just been a little R&B group in northwest London and maybe never even made records. The fact they did, they needed their second record to be a bigger hit than Come On. And as everyone knows, anything knows, it's I Want to Be Your Man, the Ringo song with the Beatles and Meet the Beatles in the USA. And if the Lennon-McCartney don't meet Andrew Oldham by total accident, as they're getting out of a taxi, having just been at the Variety Club Award, and they know him from he did PR work for Please Please Me a few months earlier. Hello, Andy. He's rehearsing the Stones in a club, Studio 51. They go there and they say, what's the problem? They're trying to find a second single. They quickly knock off. They hadn't even finished it. They quickly improvise in the middle 8. I Want to Be Your Man. Right. This is the Stones' second single. So I really like to know the writers of the Yesterday film. How do you keep they make Oasis disappear. Believe me, the Rolling Stones would disappear as well if the Beatles aren't there.
That's right. Well, our dear friend,
sorry.
Our dear mutual friend David Bedford has, with his partner Andrew, has a great book out on Imagine a Wonder Publishing called What If, and it examines all of these stories. What if it's purely Beatles related, but what if this hadn't happened? What if somebody had missed a train, or what if the whole thing? And it's just the way we live our lives. Just let the do your best, show up on time, let the universe guide you. Be the arbiter of your own guts and future. And if you think something's wrong, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't be afraid to say thanks, but no thanks.
And always remember your first impression of anybody you meet.
That's right. And let the universe guide you. Ange had one final sort of esoteric question for you.
Yeah, if you had 5 minutes with John Lennon today, what would you tell him about that moment backstage in 1963?
I'd say 2 things. One, that this moment's lived on, and that's a personal pleasure for me, but so many people hear the story, really like it. And that's why it lives on. Otherwise, and that's down to him handing his guitar to me and allowing all this to happen. But the other thing would be, of course, the Beatles meant everything that they meant and continue to mean. But the excitement of Al, Stewart and myself seeing them, Al would say in later years, it was one of the most important things of his life because it meant so much that then goes on and helps create it. Now, John Lennon, I would have loved to have said, you met a lot of people and believe me, you probably gave more pleasure and satisfaction than you could possibly imagine and changed lives. Yep. Even more than sending Acorns for Peace to world leaders with Yoko in the late 60s. You still, believe me, there would have been no Live Aid without John Lennon, and later George with his concert for Bangladesh. There would have been no Bob Geldof doing any of that. There's a footprint that they leave. besides musically, culturally, is completely off the scale.
Yeah, no, that is.
I'd say to echo a relation of yours, Michael, I would say thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much.
But not for the Aintree Iron.
Yes. An Everton reference that many people didn't get at the time, and
That's
perhaps the Iron bit they probably still don't, but still.
They probably don't. But
Yes, I do.
we've been sworn to secrecy. We'd tell you, but we'd have to kill you.
you.
Our regular friend Brendan from Ireland is tuning in, and he says Angie and Ruth have the coolest show on Facebook. Thank you, Brendan. It's only
Well,
because
I like it.
It's only because of our fabulous guests,
That's
and
right.
for people who like Buzz Bazzini, who introduce us to these fabulous people, and all of the research, and all of you for tuning in every week.
That's right.
Thank you, Robbie.
Someone's just invited me back again. Well,
Yes,
I think with all the technology problems,
Yeah.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
would be very risky. But
Yeah, well, no, let's do another show on your other book, because I'm fascinated. I'll download that on Kindle and buy it, and that's fabulous. So, as many of our regular viewers know, not only is now Angie has been designated, and we have the Guinness Book of World Records investigating. We hope we get confirmation from them.
It should be. It must be.
But we have designated her, along with Google and ChatGPT, the world's oldest weekly podcaster at 95.5 years old.
Ta-da.
Yeah, the problem is, Angie, no one's going to believe that. They're going to think, no, you've added a few, numbers there to be the oldest one.
She'll show you her wrinkly knees. You'll believe it. Elder abuse.
That's the best offer you've had today.
Elder abuse.
Probably is.
and I've got a driver's license. But she's also known as the Limerick Lady. She has a silly book out called Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus. Find that. I
should be pressing Amazon buy now straight away when we finish.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And unfortunately, your personalized limerick isn't in it because she only wrote it this morning. But to sign off and say thank you, Mr. Jon Kremer, spelled Kremer. Go buy all of his books. He's a fascinating man. We'll have you back again with your permission, John.
That's an absolutely delightful invitation. Thank you.
It was absolutely wonderful. When we download the video, we'll chop the fuzzy bits out and glue it together before we put it on YouTube.
Very thoughtful.
And yes, absolutely. No, that the all of the folks are
So
really,
now
really, really happy. So
sit and pay attention.
Are
now.
you sitting comfortably, as we should say? Then we'll begin. I'll let you count the speed. 1, 2, 3. John and Al had a bold, cheeky plan to meet Lennon. Start again. There's no John.
Nope.
You wrote it.
I wrote it.
Okay, we're starting
Okay,
again.
fine.
We'll cut this out.
It's like our broadcast.
And a 1, 2, 3. John and Al had a bold, cheeky plan to meet Lennon and show they were fans. With a backstage disguise, they caught John by surprise.
Way
Back when the Beatles began.
Ta-da!
I hope everyone out there in cyberspace is applauding too. Not me, but Angie.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
See you again soon, John.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks
I
so
will
much.
be in touch with the link, and we will post this everywhere.
Good night to you both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks to Buzz Bazzini for hooking us up.
Yes, thank you very much, Buzz. So appreciated.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Lots of love to all. See you
Bye.
all of a sudden
Bye.
next week. Bye-bye.